Hello, everyone. I'm Kristian Roberts. I'm here with my fabulous friend and co-host,
Quo Johnson.
and we are back with another episode of Taking the Stage with Kristian.
And Quo. One of the things we started doing and things we will continue to do is a land and people acknowledgement. We do this not to place blame, but to practice truth telling because it is so necessary in the work that we do. It is so necessary in connecting. It is so necessary in creating belonging, especially in our field. So I would like to take this time right here, right now in this space to acknowledge that we in Dallas are on stolen land. We are on the land of the Caddo, of the Wichita, and of the Comanche sovereign nations, nations that cultivated the land since time immemorial, nations that lived the full human experience, and nations that faced horrible conditions, that faced genocide, that faced policy that allowed for their forceful removal by any means necessary, nations that faced inhumane conditions. I also want to take the time to acknowledge that we in Dallas are on stolen land, built by stolen labor. People were taken from their homes and brought here to Dallas and forced into labor. And from that free and enforced slave labor, we have what we now enjoy as Dallas. Being a descendant of those individuals, I uplift all of our communities in truth. I uplift our communities in our lived experiences. I uplift our communities in strength. Again, Dallas is not alone in this, as the entire nation benefits from stolen land and stolen labor. But we have the opportunity now, here in this time and in this space, to heal the harm and to move forward in a way that is meaningful and in a way that is sustainable. So I thank you for joining me for this land and people acknowledgement.
And we thank you for joining us once again, week after week. You continue to show your support. To the Dallas Opera staff, of course, thank you so much for your continued support. Special shout out always to our brother and friend, David Lomeli.
Hey, David.
We know this network was his brainchild, so we very much appreciate him for him and his innovation. So, Quo, let's just kind of dive right in today. We are talking about systemic and systematic
Yeah.
in terms of dismantling,
Yeah. Yeah.
in terms of defining these terms. So I would like to start a little bit because I know that there tends to be a little confusion as to which one means what. How do
Yeah.
they relate to the systems that we talk about in place that are in place that we are trying to dismantle and replace? We also talk about it in terms of how our arts organizations are set up, et cetera, et cetera. So I
Mhm.
think what I would like to start by doing is defining the terms systemic versus systematic, and then a little later on discuss how they show up in our work.
Okay. So in
So go ahead.
Okay. So in this, what we are looking at is the fact that these are two different things. So what is systemic and what is systematic does not always come from the same place, and they are two different things. We want to be mindful that when we say that we are having to fight systems, we are fighting the ways in which a system systemically sustains itself. A lot of S's, but the ways in which, regardless of what we do and how we attempt to change and dismantle, we have to be intentional about those things. Otherwise, there's always something that will support it. So systemic has grown from systematic, as in intentional actions, to create unintentional impacts that stems long beyond what we originally intended. So I always, in this work, right, in this equity work and in belonging work, it is a matter that we understand that when we say systematic, we mean intentional. Jim Crow, intentional. Laws that prevented women from voting, intentional. The systemic things are the results that come after that and what continues to build and what continues to form, as in the hierarchy and who gets to own housing, where the wealth comes from and not being able to own houses, where societal norms come from and not being able to walk on the same side of the street as someone, or not having to look someone in the eye because you don't have to, and how that carries over, right? We look at the systematic as in the intentional things that were put in place, and then the systemic as in the responses from that and how the system continues to build. We look at housing, we look at who was able to own land, who was given land, who stole land, whose land was taken. We look at the ways in which communities start to engage in different rights once they have access to them. We look at, even in the opera, right? We look at the ways that those who have had resources in a system that supports those with more resources continue to get auditions, continue to be able to afford to go to auditions, continue to be able to be seen as the ideal role, whereas those who are facing the systematic ways that people were locked out are now facing the systemic expectations of, oh, you should be able to do the same things the exact same way because you should have the same resources, when we know we do not. These things are often kind of confused in so many ways. And in the end, we're still fighting against systems and we're still wanting to create systems change. But in this, it's a matter of intentional, it's a matter of being impactful. So we want to be mindful of what those two different things are, but how we have to use both of them in order for us to actually come about and bring true change.
So yeah, that's a great definition. I well, no, it really is because it draws it right to how it affects the arts, in particular when we look at the expectations of a young singer, the expectations of somebody who's aspiring to be a stage director, expectations of somebody who's supposed to play in the orchestra, and if they have not had access to the
Right,
things that the system requires and
right.
how that puts them further behind. So it forces us to look at the systems that were put in place,
Yes.
and the result of those systems being put in place. And
And I would say it also forces us to look at the ways that people use the system to deliberately keep people out.
well,
So
and to
those who have
justify,
to justify. So those who
yeah,
had the opportunity to start to learn to play an instrument at whatever age, because they had access to those resources, naturally, of course, will know this world and be able to navigate this world different than someone who's coming in as a teenager, someone who's coming in as an adult. We will also want to
absolutely.
be mindful that entire communities were purposely kept out of these things for generations.
Well, and it's deliberate. It doesn't just show up. We
Yes.
talk about it showing up in segregation, but what people don't realize, what a lot of people don't realize, is that the arts were not exempt for that. And I'm not saying that they didn't realize that it was a thing. What I'm saying is that Marian Anderson did not get to make her debut at the Metropolitan Opera until she was quote unquote beyond her prime. She was in her 50s, right?
Mhm.
We know that that was deliberate due to segregation,
That was
due to
systematic.
due
Yep.
to Jim Crow, absolutely. We know that
Yep.
it was deliberate. So that was something that was systematic, that was in place. What eventually happens is, and I think I always think about the medical field when they talk about this, and everybody always asks me, I'm not a doctor by any means, but I think about it when you get sick and something is all over your body, an infection is all over your body or within your body, right? We say that it's systemic, okay, because it's contaminated the whole thing. The plan that the doctor puts in place to treat you, that intentional methodical plan that is put into place, is a systematic treatment plan, right? That is what is put into place. So when we're looking at these things, when we look at things that are systemic, so for example, opera is a microcosm of the real world. So if racial issues are going to happen in the world, guess what? They're going to happen in our opera world, right? So all of a sudden, you have something that is contaminated the whole body of the field,
Yeah.
right? Of the
Yeah.
industry, right? It's
Yeah.
contaminated the whole thing. Now we have to put a systematic treatment plan in place, methods, planning, aka your EDI sessions, okay, your racial healing work, your examining of policies and supremacy culture norms. Those are the systems in the sorry, pardon me. Those are the plans and the treatment that you put in place to address these issues that are systemic, that have diseased the whole body. This is how you go to fix it. The same way a doctor would come in and say, you need steroids, you need antibiotics, if you got some sort of infection, right? Any treatment plan that they had put in place, that's what I liken it to. And
Mhm.
any singer out there who's ever been sick before and had their whole system affected by their sickness is very grateful for that systematic treatment plan that that doctor puts in place to help them. All
Yeah.
right. So that's sort of how I think of it. So if it helps you all out there to think of it in those terms, think of it in those terms. It's that infection and that wound that we talk about all the time that has to be that you have to have a treatment plan for, that you have to root out, okay, clean out, clean up before it hurts the whole body. And a lot of times it has already done damage to the entire body.
Yeah.
And we see that with our country, and the way that racism and capitalism and classism have all played in a corner with each other, and have put and have basically is a system that has been set in place that affects everything.
Everything.
It affects education. It affects policy. It affects our opera houses. It affects our churches. It affects everything. So I would encourage everybody to take a look at those words, take a look at the words and how we're looking at them, and understand that they are two different things. But when you hear them, they do go hand in hand, specifically in the terms that we're talking about today, as it relates to how it affects the arts organizations. And this goes for sexism. This goes for misogyny. Anything that's puts
Mhm.
that is
Ableism,
meant to deliberately leave other
anti-LGBTQ.
people out
Yeah.
and only serve a certain group, or only be for a certain group. This is what we're talking about. We're
Mhm.
talking about all of those marginalized communities that it affects. So don't think we're on here just sitting up and talking about one thing. This is several things that we could get into today. So that's my soapbox on that.
I think it's beautiful because this extends into so many other things, and the ways in which, of course, we have to get out of the binary thinking. So in
Yes.
order for us to address those systemic issues, those things that continue to come back, even if we attempt, even in our intentions, even in our efforts to get rid of it, it's not enough just to do it once. It's the things that we have to continually address, the things that we have to continually support through policy, the things we have to continually support through experiential learning, the things that we have to support through just cultural awareness in the ways that we go about doing this work, and understanding where we place our intentions, and then where we place our actions, and then where we place the ability for us to measure what we're doing. So often everybody wants to take this approach in that as we approach systemic things, we do so based on how we feel.
Hmm.
And again, systems don't care about your emotions. Have emotions, have intentions. It is not enough just to go in and say, oh, we're all loving family. We all get along. I care about this person so much, but that person still has something that they have to deal with when they go home, because they are facing systemic things that stemmed from systematic intentions to ensure that their community does not have the same access. So as we're looking at systems, and as our organizations are trying to make sure that we change this, know that this is systems change, and it has to be done on multiple levels, and it has to be consistent, and it has to be intentional. And then as we're looking at this, we want to be mindful, again, equity and equality are not the same thing. Equity is not the same thing as equality. So if we find ourselves in spaces where we are questioning why one group, or why one individual, or why one identity is getting more attention or more resources, it is because that is what is fair, because things have not been fair. Therefore, we have to put in the intentional effort and systematic approach to make sure that we are fighting the system. I can give you resources now, but as you get out of this space, knowing that you won't have the same resources that everybody else has, what does that do? It does not actually address the issue, nor does it allow us to move forward in a way that we know we want to, and in a way we know we can, in a way that we feel and that we know we should. So it's important that, yes, as we are moved by our emotions, because we are emotional creatures, we're in a very creative art form industry. As we are moved by those things, we have to also put in the work to address them in a way that is intentional, because this
And that's
division,
sustainable.
that's
It is
sustainable,
sustainable.
that is systematic, because this division was created in that same way. But again, we cannot use the same tools that created the system
No,
to
we cannot.
dismantle the system. And those are the tools of white supremacy. Those are the tools of patriarchy. Those are the tools of anything that dismisses the full human experience, and that does not allow us to be fully human in the ways that we show up to do this work, and in the ways that we show up to tell and share in our stories. That does not mean we should not be accountable. That does not mean that all things should be allowed in every space, because no. But it does mean that we have to acknowledge the false division that has been put in place, the reasons behind the fallacy of a hierarchy, the reasons behind whether or not I have to defend my humanity and explain why my life matters because nobody else is getting their life questioned, the reasons behind why we have to do these things, and the work that we have to put in place as organizations to be intentional. It's not enough for us to just be nice. It's not enough for us to be kind. It's not enough for us to care about one another. We should, and we do, and it's great and it's beautiful. But our caring and our kindness and our love for one another is going against a system that does not get tired. It's going
Exactly.
against systemic issues
Yeah.
that reiterate themselves and that support themselves and that continue to build on themselves unless we intentionally disrupt, dismantle, and replace them with something better.
Replace. Absolutely. And that's where we have to talk about the fact that, yes, our emotions are fine, like you said, and our emotions move us to do something.
Honor
But in that
those.
doing something, it should not be reactionary.
Mm.
Because a lot of times when something is reactionary, it's only a temporary fix to make us feel better in that moment. And there's a lot of that going on. And then what that ends up being is something that is a performative solution. It's not a
Right.
solution at all. It's just performative. There's nothing deeper. There's nothing rooted. There's nothing there to address what the root of the problem is. And so we
Mhm.
find ourselves running into issues because we go, well, we did this, and why is this coming back up again? It's because we didn't put something there in place that was sustainable. We did not truly dismantle anything. We did not truly replace anything. We put a band-aid on something.
Yeah.
And there are consequences to those kinds of decisions. There are consequences to not putting things in place, because you will find yourself right back at a point again saying, how is this happening again? And we've seen that over and over again, just with even in the past year, we've seen that over and over again with different situations that is coming across this country right now. So within our organizations, we are not exempt from
Mhm.
those potholes, if you will, those traps, if you will. We're not exempt. We're human. And so we're going to make mistakes. But the thing is, when you make those mistakes, and this sort of moves into this next section, there is an accountability that has to happen, right? In any job, there is accountability. In any decision that you make, there is being accountable for that decision, accountable to yourself, accountable to the people that you work with, accountable to people that you live with. Whatever it is, there's a decision that there has to be accountability. I say that because we live in a society that thinks that if you hold someone accountable, all of a sudden you're canceling someone.
Ooh, cancel culture.
And I would ask, is it canceling somebody, or is it finally getting consequences for your actions or your policies that are put in place to oppress people, or for your unkind words that you say about someone who is different from you, or those glass ceilings you continue to put in place that people burst through, and then there's another one there waiting on them. So let's really ask ourselves, is it canceling or is it consequences? um, and the excuse of, well, it was okay to do that back then, but you can't do that now. Well, we can't say anything now. Everything has to be PC. No, it wasn't okay to do those things back then, whenever that was. Okay. It's just that now people are standing up and saying no more, because it wasn't right all along. That's the thing. That's learning from history. I would say also, Quo talks a lot about intention versus impact, right? We can make decisions as arts organizations and have the greatest of intentions for them. But sometimes there are things that we can and cannot control, that are
Yeah.
outside of our control, that cause the impact to fall a little differently.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's stuff that's within our control that maybe we didn't catch before then, maybe we didn't think about before it went out, whatever it is. And we go, that might not have been a good thing. So what do you do after that? What do you do in terms of accountability? Quo, I'll
Yeah.
let you take this, and I've been talking, but go
No,
ahead.
no, no. That's what this is. We encourage everybody to be having these conversations. That is the purpose of taking the stage with Kristian and Quo. I recall last year during one of the Opera America conference presentations and panel discussions, A question was asked, how do we make sure that we do this the right way? So many people are afraid to start because they want to make sure that they are right, and that they do things correctly. We are creating a world we have never seen. This will not be a matter of being correct as much as it is a matter of being intentional, as much as it is a matter of being committed, and as much as it is a matter of being willing to be changed because we want to bring about change. So in this accountability looks like making sure that when we do make mistakes, that we have the humility and we have the perseverance to correct ourselves, to remain in the space, to continue to be engaged. There's this very binary thinking that comes with supremacy culture, in that either I am in the space, I am competent, I am perfect, perfectionism, and I have the power to make decisions because I'm the greatest, power hoarding, and I should be comfortable, right to comfort. We combine all these things and we find ourselves in spaces where, unless we are perfect and unless we are seen as perfect, unless we are correct, we disengage.
Mm-hmm.
Either I am here and I am the leader and I am doing a great job, or I don't want to touch it because I'm afraid to start because I don't want to get in trouble, or because I don't want to say or do the wrong things. You're probably already saying and doing the wrong things. We all are
100%.
probably
Yeah,
already
there's a
saying,
guarantee that at some point you are
yeah,
saying and doing the wrong thing.
you're gonna, at some point, you're gonna
That
say and do the wrong thing.
it's
And
called being human.
it's
You know,
called
it's
being
called being
human.
human. But the question is, what do you do after you realize
Yes,
you said or done the wrong thing?
you have to make sure that you are centering what matters. And what matters is us being able to connect and move this work forward. So, in this, you have to be willing to respond in a way, not to defend yourself. We've talked about what it means to actually apologize, and you don't apologize by saying everything that you did right. It's not an apology, but
Oof.
acknowledge impact, right? First and foremost, acknowledge impact, acknowledge that, yes, your intentions were not so, right? But in this, acknowledge that there is misalignment between intention and impact. So you have to put in the work to make sure that you are doing what is necessary to ensure that the intentions that you want to happen is also the impact that you see. It is not enough for us to say, well, that's not what I meant, and then go on about your day. Not when you're actually wanting to build relationships, not when you're actually wanting to fight against something that is systemic. Because the moment that you go away, the system just comes back in and
Yep.
continues to oppress, it continues to pull from it, continues to deny humanity. So we have to be consistent. We have to be humble in how we approach these things. And we have to be in community and in connection with one another so that we can learn together. We have to be patient, because sometimes when we make mistakes, and I'm sure many organizations have felt this, going into communities, wanting to create relationships, but having to deal with things that had nothing to do with you before, or your tenure within the organization, but you're having to answer for the things that happened before you, or for the things the organization has done before you got there. It's a matter of building relationships, and it's a matter of listening, and it's a matter of self-examination. In what ways am I contributing? In what ways can I contribute to actually finding solutions? And then it's a matter of being committed to doing that, and doing that, knowing that, and we've said it before, you won't see the full breadth of the work in your lifetime, and you shouldn't, because we won't solve it in our lifetime, because it was not created in our lifetime. But we'll make some very huge and some amazing steps going forward. We just have to be able to jettison ourselves from the idea that I have to be right, or I have to be perfect, or my feelings matter more than your ability to live your life safely. That's wild. That happens so often. I
Yes,
don't
it
want this
does.
statement to be said, or I don't want any of these things to go on, and I don't want to have this conversation because I'm emotionally uncomfortable, which creates physical responses. But other people are still trying to make sure that they live their lives,
Yes.
right?
And if
We
you're
talk
tired
about
of
false
hearing about it
equivalence,
and have to talk about it
right?
and having to see things about it, imagine having to live it. We're tired too.
Yeah, just
The same thing. So it's you have to think about those things when you do that self-examination. It's a very real thing. And because organizations are made of people, this is also a personal thing. It's a personal thing that has professional impact.
yeah.
So it has to happen. Our organizations are made up of people and made up of humans. So this is what has to happen. It has to be a personal decision to you to decide who you're going to be, what you're going to do, and when you make a mistake, if you make a mistake, how do you hold yourself accountable for it? Particularly in this kind of work, we are building a world we've never seen before. We've never seen it. So there's a bound to be some fumbles and bumbles along the way. But the thing is that what do? You get up, you dust yourself off, you assess, and then you figure out how to do it better next time.
Mm.
And that to me is what we call that labor of longevity. It's going to take time. It's going to take commitment.
Yeah.
But in order to do the right thing, that's what happens. That's life. That's how
That's,
it is.
that's like,
Um, so we've actually had some positive things come through here. We probably could have ended, like 5 minutes ago, because you gave really good feedback on what people could do. But go ahead and give us a few positive notes, Quo.
yes, positive notes. The beautiful thing about going against systems and going against something that is systemic is that it is not a direct reflection of who we are. So we want to get outside of that binary thinking. We want to free ourselves from the assumption that because we're good people, we can only do good things and that we cannot harm people and that there has to be malice behind oppression. It is not true. So in this, as we free ourselves, we also have the ability to look up, to look around, and to see that we are so alike in this way, and in the ways in which we want to connect with others, in the ways in which we want this art form to mean something to those who seek it, for those who receive it, to those who want anything to do with it. And in order for us to do that, we have to come together in community. We have to be systematic. We have to be intentional. We have to be skilled. We have to have plans. We have to put in policies. We have to have support to make sure that we are, again, disrupting, that we're dismantling, and that we're replacing what is there. It's a construct, which means that we can construct something better together. And that's how we get it done. So take heart in that, as I always say, that you are not alone in this. But there is work that has to be done on an individual level, on an organizational level, on a societal level. But the more that we do this work, the more we get to experience how amazing those connections are, because it is contagious. And then the better equipped we are to continue to attack the systemic things that prevent us from being able to connect with one another. So those are my positive notes for this episode.
Fabulous positive notes as per usual. Folks, be bold, be creative, ask questions.
Yeah.
Please, as usual, give us your comments. Send us a message. We're happy to answer questions. The idea is to help. We are the arts. We are storytellers. We are artists. We are arts administrators. We are people who are problem solvers. We know how to do this. We do it on stage, backstage, in our
Yeah.
offices all the time. So we should be fighting headlong into this. And quite frankly, the arts have always been a form of trying to make society better. Let's step up to the plate and do our job.
Mm.
So with that, folks, thank you for joining us. We appreciate you being here week after week. Reach out to us if you want to connect. And until then, we'll see you next time. Peace.
Have a good one. Bye.